back in rodeo with Junior Gomez again. He's invited us back, or invited me back, and it's, I don't know, the 2nd of April, I think, 2018. Third.
Time flies.
Yeah, time flies. So, Junior was telling me last time when we had the tape off about a song that can be played at funerals but also at dances. And you want to tell us about that, Junior?
It's called Golondrinas, and it's a slow waltz, and it is used as a farewell for funerals or just a regular dance tune, and it's mainly with a violin, and I can't play the violin anymore, and I picked up the harmonica and the guitar, and I'll do my best to play it for you. I do have Parkinson's, and I shake, so you're going to have to excuse my mistakes. It's a long one, but we'll stop it there. and But I did used to play for dances around rodeo and Douglas, Lordsburg, Silver City, Safford, around, and I was playing the lead guitar at the time, and I decided I needed a different sound, so I picked up the harmonica. And at first, it's very hard to coordinate the two together, and it's like walking and chewing gum at the same time. They asked me, how do you do that? And I said, well, I can walk around and do that too. And I got involved with cowboy poetry, and we used to do a lot of shows, and I would tell my stories, and this was my main thing, play the guitar and the harmonica, and it went over real good, and so I took that on, and like I say, I'm getting slow at it, and I keep trying, and I'm not going to give up. I know you asked me for one song. You said you had heard it, and I'll try it. You said Waltz Across Texas.
Yes, please.
I used to sing all these songs too, but like I say, I've been out of practice for so long, I don't want to scare you off the video. If you notice, I've got a thing on my thumb here. He, everybody says, "How'd you hurt your thumb?" I didn't hurt my thumb. It's the only way I can hold a pick. I can't hold it between the thumb and the finger. I loose it. If I get a thumb pick, I loose it. So I cut the thumb off a glove and put the pick in it, and I tape it on, and I can strum with it. And that's the only way I can do it.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
When I was listening to Waltz Across Texas,
Uh-huh.
I could see women doing waltzing and
Oh, yeah.
big dresses going around.
Oh, yeah.
I had that picture in my mind.
Yeah.
And it must be really fun to be playing it and
It
watching
is.
the people dance.
It is amazing. You get to watching the people dance, and it helps your rhythm and all that, and it's just a good feeling to see people get happy.
Yes.
Some of them have too much happiness
Right.
in them,
Right.
and but yeah, when I was growing up here in Rodeo, we used to have dances at the tavern, and the most of the labor force was Hispanic, and they used to have the Mexican dances over here at a little place called, the man's name was Charles Brown, and he had a jukebox, and he would fix it to where it would play music over and over, and people, of course, would buy ice cream, sodas, and stuff like that. And but I heard a lot of music there. I remember one night I was still a little kid, and he had benches around by the wall, and I got tired of watching people dance. I was always listening to music though. So I crawled behind the bench and I fell asleep. I woke up and it was dark, quiet. Everybody had gone home. And we lived in a railroad house right across the street from the rodeo tavern. And so I didn't know what to do, so I opened the door real careful and locked it from inside and went to the house. And some friends were getting ready to leave to go to Animas. They had just come to visit. And they just looked at me, and it's a weird feeling. Nobody missed me. There I was all by myself, and then at the tavern they had the Western dances, and there was a lady named Pugscott used to play a fiddle, and there was a piano with her, and I believe some drums. And one of the tunes I remember that they used to play for those dances was called the Tennessee Waltz, and it went like that. If I can remember how it goes. And I remember that was usually done after shipping they shipped cattle on the train, and they had those dances, and they had a barbecue and stuff like that. I remember those cowboy boots just going across the floor, scratching the floor all up. And they'd bring dirt and manure and everything in there. They didn't care. They'd stomp on the floor and the dust would come up. But Zola was remembering that her grandfather, Jack Maloney, he used to do the barbecue. I remember two of them. And I'd go over there because it sure did smell good. And he had a pit, and he would put mesquite wood in it. And when it got down to the coals, why, he put a metal grating on top of the pit, and he would throw some big old chunks of beef on there and turn it over and baste it with something or the other. And when it was done, come on, Junior, let's taste it and see if it's done. So he couldn't tell me twice. There I was, and that was good barbecue, and that's one of the memories of my old hometown. And
Yeah. So you're playing a lot. Did you ever get to dance with your wife?
no, she would rather I wouldn't
Oh,
step on her toes. No, see,
so you guys didn't dance.
no, not at those dances. We would go to dances.
That's what I wondered. When
Yeah.
you weren't playing, did you guys get a chance?
Yeah, I'd love to dance with her, and
Yeah.
we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, she would go to every dance though
When you were playing.
when I was playing.
Yeah.
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 It's a song, but I'm not going to play it. I'll read it. And it's called My Old Hometown, and it's about living here in Rodeo in the railroad house, and we lived across the tracks from the cattle pens and all that, listening to the trains and the cattle and the cowboys. From that I wrote this. It says, just sitting here thinking of old times gone by, when I was a young boy, oh how time does fly. We lived by the railroad in this little old town where cowmen and trackmen were always around. I remember the rumble of wheels on the rails and the sounds of the engines. I can still hear them well. And remembering the sounds of the cattle and the cowboys getting closer and closer. What a beautiful sound. The whoops and the hollering, the whistles and yelps, the whinny of horses, they all mix in well. The train cars are ready for hauling the beefs. They're going by rail, they're going back east. But all this is gone now. The railroad is no more. The cow pens are gone too, forevermore. But the memories remain, they're all in my mind, of the good men and women, better folks you can't find. Whether trackmen or cowmen, they made this old town, and these are the memories of my old hometown. And that's what I wrote about my old hometown. And I don't have the right harmonica, I can't sing it. You would have to step on my toes to get that high note. So I won't even try it.
Do you want to share some other stories
Sure.
that you've written about in your book?
Yeah, we used to get the hobos that would, every time they would ride the trains, and every time the train would stop, they would jump off, and most of them would go bum food and whatever. And they were a whole nother breed of people. When you picture a hobo, you picture a sloppy looking man with dirty, baggy clothes and about a month's worth of beard on his face, and a knapsack on a pole over his shoulder. Well, maybe, and the knapsack on a pole, I didn't see one, but they did carry a few things in a sack. Sometimes a gunny sack, and sometimes what looked like a dirty pillowcase. They would jump off the train here at Rodeo, and it seems that they would find our house first. We lived pretty close to the tracks. When a westbound freight train would stop for water, that left some of the train cars stopped right behind our house, and it made our house more convenient for them. Of course, my mother could never refuse food to anybody, even though it was pretty limited at our house, being a big family and all. If nothing else, she would fix them a bean or egg burrito, which they devoured in a hurry, and of course, hot coffee. But one thing is sure, most of them were lazy. I guess that's why they were also called bums. From what I've read after I was grown up, is that many made a career of riding trains and bumming. They got to travel and see the country and never had to work for a living, just a bumming around. Well, one cold weather night, we were all sitting around the table doing our homework around a coal oil lamp and next to our wood-burning stove heater. Dad had gone to a little town called Hermanas between here and El Paso because he was a relief foreman. It's about 80 miles from Rodeo towards El Paso, and he was, like I said, a relief foreman on an extra gang outfit. The outfit cars were parked on the rails that at one time at Hermanas went to Deming. These rails to Deming had been taken up when they decided that to continue the rails straight through Hermanas to El Paso. Anyway, it had snowed 3 or 4 inches that Sunday afternoon, and Mom was crocheting and we kids were doing our homework. It was already dark outside. We heard a freight train coming in. The bells on the engine were clanging, and we could hear the steam spewing and the brakes squealing. All these sounds were familiar to us, except that the sounds were more muffled when there was snow on the ground. It wasn't as noisy. The train had just been stopped for a minute when we heard the back door in our house being opened. We all stopped what we were doing and stared at each other. Everybody that needed to be here was here. For a second, Mom thought, well, maybe Dad had turned around and come back for some reason. But so she called, Elias, ¿tú eres? Elias, that was my dad's name. Is that you? About that time, we heard a loud crash and a thud. The back door was in the bedroom, and the kitchen floor was 2 steps into the kitchen. We knew it wasn't Dad. It had to be somebody that was not familiar with the house. We had the other bedroom door and the kitchen door closed to keep the stove, to keep the heat where we were. Mom grabbed a pair of scissors, which was the handiest weapon she could find, and yelled out loud, you so-and-so, and you'd better get out of here or I'll kill you. And Mom never used that bad language like that, but she did then. She was afraid and she would have done anything to protect her children. We heard the person scrambling back up the steps and across the bedroom floor and heard the back door slam as he went back to the train, which was just starting to move. We were sure it had to be a hobo and got back on the train and left. But Mom told us, go call our neighbor and let him know what happened. So we went over there, and I didn't have my shoes on, but I did have my socks, and which got soggy with the snow outside. And the neighbor came back with a rifle and a flashlight, and he came in through the front door, through the kitchen, across the bedroom floor, and out the back door. He followed the footprints, which led back to the railroad, and came back, and he said, well, it must have been a hobo, and he got on the train and left. And up to that point, I didn't think we ever locked our doors other than with a small latch, probably just to keep the wind from blowing it open. In the excitement, the neighbor came over in his long johns and boots. When he realized, if you know what the long johns were then, they had a bunch of buttons in front and had a flap in the back, and in case you needed to go to the bathroom, you didn't unbutton all the buttons in front, you just opened the flap in the back and did your business. Anyway, my sister started giggling, and he couldn't understand why they were giggling. And when he realized, well, he grabbed his rifle and reached behind and grabbed the flap and pulled it up and took off running. But it was too late. He had already cracked us a smile. So that's one hobo story, and I've got so many stories that I would keep you here all month long just talking.
Do you remember, were the hobos pretty common, or you'd see them often?
There were quite a few.
Yeah.
Quite a few. They were always on the freight trains, of course. Yeah, we used to get a lot of freight trains through here. We would get the troop trains, and one thing about the troop trains, they had the passenger cars for the soldiers, and then they had a lot of flat cars with jeeps and tanks and all that equipment, cannons, and that was kind of exciting to see, and especially in rodeo. And I remember that one prisoner train went through here, and it was Germans, and one of them managed to get out of the car that they were in, but he was caught right away, and that was big excitement in rodeo, which rodeo needed the excitement anyway. And well, the sad ones were the white cars with a big red cross, and they were injured soldiers, and they had big windows on the side, and a lot of the soldiers would be laying on their bed, with casts on and everything, just waving at everybody. And those troop trains, the soldiers would go up and down and gather a bunch of pennies. I mean, bunches of pennies. And as soon as the train moved to start to leave, they would scatter pennies, and all us kids would dive after the pennies, and it created a lot of fights. But it was a lot of fun. The soldiers got a big kick watching us. The cooks once in a while they would see us out there, and they had a little white box with lunch in it, a sandwich, apple, orange, something like that, and they'd give it to us. And that was pretty good stuff, we thought.
Did you know anybody from rodeo that was in the war?
Yes, sir. We were talking about Finley Richards the other day, Bill Richards, Bob Jarvis. I've got a book here that tells of everybody that there were quite a few. There was I don't know of any that got killed during the war. They seemed to have made it back all right. And
Finley was captured.
he went on that death march, they called it, and he managed to survive. I think that happened in the Philippines, didn't it? That
I
big
think so.
march.
Did you have another story, we don't have to read it necessarily, that you wanted to mention, Junior? Or?
Well, I remember the drive-ins that we had at rodeo, and there wasn't anything to do on weekends, so the ladies got together and they cooked up an idea that they might raise some funds too for different things, and so they got the idea to hang a big old sheet on the west side of the old school, and they would set up a camera, and of course everybody was excited to go to the drive-in, and they would have
But just
dancing in the rain and stuff like that, and
about what year is this? What year?
it had to be,
Early 50s.
That's what I was thinking.
yeah. And Clarence Russell used to mainly run the projector, and he had a store over here with a barber shop, and one little thing about Clarence, he was a bus driver too, but he had the barber shop, and we would go in there and to get a haircut, which was a quarter maybe or something like that, and we would get on his chair and he would pump it up to raise us up, and he would shake his linen and put it around our necks, and then he'd get his clippers and take half our head off, and how do you want it? Anyway, he used to run the projector too. He used to be the Santa Claus at the school, and a lot of the times the film would break, and you could hear it going, tuk, 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 and the screen would go blank and everything, and he'd get his flashlight and tape the film together, and by that time everybody had gone to the bathroom and did whatever they needed to, and it was a good break, and then finished the film. I was in Dad's old Model T. I ran the heck out of that car, and to start it, I'd have to put it in neutral, open the door, and push it, and then jump in real quick, put it in gear, and let the clutch out, and it started. And that one day, well, whenever I'd go to the drive-in movie, well, I'd always wait until everybody left so that I'd have room to push and get it started. And I had put gas in it earlier, but if the gauge said full, you'd better head for the gas pump because it meant empty. It was a little bubble on the dashboard. I don't know how it worked, but it was a little bubble, and the gas somehow got in there and turned it to empty or full or half. And I went hunting that day, just messing around, and by the time I went to the movies, well, I wasn't sure how much gas I had left, and after everybody left, I wanted to look in the tank, which was right in front of the windshield, outside on top of pretty close to the engine. And I couldn't see the gas, so I thought, I think I can hold a match way up here and see it in there, and surely it'd be safe enough. So I struck the match and held it up high, and the fumes caught it. Boom! And oh man, it scared the daylights out of me. I wanted to lay down and start stinking right there, and so I went and I was trying to figure what to do, and I thought, well, I can put dirt in there and maybe stop the flames. And I decided, no, that wouldn't be too wise. So I figured, well, maybe I can just back up and leave town because it's going to explode. It's going to do something. But instead, I thought, well, if I put the gas cap on it and screw it on tight, it's going to smother the flames. Anyway, I put it on, but I didn't stay to watch what was going to happen. I went around the school building, and I was staring around the corner, and it wasn't doing anything. So I went back over there, and I took the cap off and see what happens. Boom! Again, it had built up pressure, but no flames, which was good. And I lost the gas cap for a little while, and I finally found it. But anyway, I pushed the car and came home, and I checked the gas the next day at daylight. And it was a lot safer that way. Yeah.
That's quite a story.
Yeah.
And you got married in 1957,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And were the movies still going then?
Oh, no. No.
They weren't there. You
No.
guys didn't get to go to the movies together to the drive.
Well, after the drive-in, the ladies had 4-H, and Grace was one of them, and they moved the movies. When it started getting cold, they moved the movies over to Buford and Vivian Martin's old store and held the movies inside, and the girls would pop popcorn and stuff like that, and that's where we watched the movies. And she was one of them in there, which was good, because I got to watch a lot of movies sitting next to her then.
That's what I wondered. You're a young couple, if you got to dance, go to the movies, and have fun. And
Oh yeah,
Well, yeah.
as much as we could, because unless you all live in town, why, everybody's scattered, it's not that easy. And if you didn't have the vehicles to travel with, why, it was pretty hard to do.
would people come in from their ranches to see the movies or music?
Yeah, mainly just local, or just close, and then the farms opened up, and there was more people then. That they made money for, I don't know, they sold Cokes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Junior, you had a story that you were, I think, thinking of talking about with the school bus.
What is yellow and black, bounces up and down, rattles your teeth out of your mouth, and gets your clothes and hair, makes them turn white. And the thing was our school bus, an international school bus, in which we rode to school in Animas after we were transferred from Rodeo. The Rodeo school was located at Chestnut and 3rd. Chestnut was between the Cambridge Hotel and the post office. Anyway, we would all load into the school bus, and it was an international, and Mrs. Jarvis was the lady's name that drove it. And the seats weren't facing the front, but they were along the sides of the bus, and the kids were facing each other. They were like benches. And so we'd sit there. We'd load the bus, and she would get out a cigarette and light it up. And she had long, skinny fingers, and she would hold the steering wheel and put the cigarette between her fingers, and we'd take off. And mainly she just held the cigarette, and you could see the ashes just getting longer and longer, but they wouldn't shake off. And we'd turn off at the Animas turnoff, which is Highway 9, and get on that road. And that road had a lot of washboard places. They were real rough. And we'd rattle and roll and just fishtail across there. And we'd go around that where the landing field was, and there's a curve right there. And we would sometimes go sideways and sometimes straighten out, but we managed to go through. And you'd look at her hand, and after all that shaking and rattling, all the ashes were still on the cigarette. And we'd go past the Beacon Hill, and you have to be familiar where the Beacon Hill is. It's between Animas and Rodeo. And we'd go through there. There was one stretch of road that was pretty good, and then we'd get into the Malpai Rock. And of course, it don't make any difference how good they bladed it, it was still rough. And it had pockets of dirt. I mean, just fine, powdery like flour. And we'd hit those pockets, and just the bus, you couldn't see each other across the bus. And the girl's hair would turn white, and we had short hair. It got dirty, but it wasn't as noticeable. And we'd get to the school, and everybody'd get out dusting themselves out. And when we hit that last cattle guard, just before we got to the school, we'd hit that cattle guard, and the ashes would fall off the cigarette. And so it was something that I watched all the time, and I don't know if anybody else did, but just before we'd get to school, we had a coal furnace at the school, and you could see the black smoke coming out the chimney, and we had steam heat from that furnace, and we knew the building would be warm. And we'd get to the school, and it was, I guess there were maybe 100 kids at the time altogether. And it was a small school. For deer season and stuff like that, they would let school out for 2 or 3 days, which is unheard of nowadays. But it was, oh, there's so many stories about the school. We had a cafeteria that was an old army barracks there at the school. And whenever we played basketball, we had to stay and not catch the bus home, because then we couldn't go to the game and play ball. And the cooks would leave the cafeteria unlocked, and all us basketball players would go in and make cheese sandwiches or whatever they left for us, and they only asked that you leave the place clean again. And so we did, and that helped us a lot. After the games were over, we had to catch a ride home, and the only ride home was the train. And so we'd take off running towards the depot, and about that time you could see the train coming over the hill, and you just flag it down and it'd stop, and we'd get on it. And we had a railroad pass, that's what Dad had, but they never would even ask for it. They knew that we were just going to Rodeo. So we would catch the train there and get off at Rodeo. And one night, I missed the train and had some cattle pens right there pretty close to the depot. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I headed back for the gym because usually they had some comforters and stuff for us to sleep on if we couldn't catch a ride home. And we had some warm-up uniforms that were made out of corduroy. And you'd run up and down the gym floor and then that corduroy just make all kinds of noise. And I hated them more than anything else, but that night I had to spend the night at the cattle pens, and it was cold. And they had a little shack up there where they counted their cattle, and it had a big padlock. And I used quite a few rocks, but I got that padlock off, and I went inside, and that's where I spent the night. And I was thankful for those corduroy suits. And people, I guess, wondered what happened to the lock. And like I say, now they know the rest of the story.
Did you get a pretty good education at the school?
It was good education, and probably the best teacher was the toughest one. The ones we hated the most is the one we learned the most from. And we took our typewriting classes from her, and through her I learned how to type, and that's how I got my job as a telegraph operator. And you were required, to get that job, you were required to type so many words per minute, and I could handle that, and so I got on as telegraph operator. At the time, the telegraphy was going out. They were using phones mainly, and so I didn't get to really learn telegraphy. But I would mess around with it, and everybody on the line knew it was me because I didn't know what I was doing. And they would call up, "Junior, get off that line." Oh, okay. Those telegraph machines would have a clacking sound. And in order that they could hear it around the depot, they would put a Prince Albert coffee can on it. And it would echo the sound, make it louder. And it was quite an experience. It was a good paying job. But I was at the bottom of the seniority list, so I had to do a lot of traveling back and forth, which is good. I got a lot of experience, and most of the operators were just that, telegraph operators. But I got to experience the agents' jobs. You know, they would go on vacation, and they would send me to do that kind of work, and so I learned quite a bit from that. I used to work from Fairbank, Arizona, through Bisbee, through Douglas, through Apache, through Rodeo, Animas, Hatchita, Hermanus, Mimbres, Columbus, Malpai, Arenas, into El Paso, and then on to Tucumcari, which is a long way, and then on the other line back to Lordsburg. And it was an experience because Grace and I got married about that time, and so she got to do a lot of the traveling and a lot of the driving for me.
Another one, I was curious if you had been to the Cienega in the day, because I've been told it was quite a
It was a beautiful place, and it has the word Cienega because it was a cienega, all the water and stuff, and cottonwood trees, real thick, beautiful green. You'd come off Granite Gap and you could see, looked like a forest through there, beautiful, beautiful. We spent one night there as Boy Scouts, and of course the mosquitoes, they didn't just sting you, they'd haul you off and try to eat you alive, but finally it all started drying out, and the trees, they're mainly all gone now, and But that, later on, the Game and Fish put in a little solar pump, and they had a tank going there with fish and frogs and stuff. And as far as I know, there's still a little pump, and it goes down the San Simon River, and which is a little old trickle, and I think they keep it there to keep those little native minnows alive.
Another question I had, you talked about how important the Palancias were and how much you would walk up there by yourself. And I wondered if you had any other stories or favorite places you'd go to, or...
Well, the Palancios, I guess I knew them real well from Skeleton Canyon all the way to the Antelope Pass, which is where the road is between here and Animas. And I spent a lot of time up there exploring the caves, exploring everything. And I spent a lot of time up there I always had that, I wanted to be by myself where I could hear different sounds, different sights. And so I was always up in the Palancios, and I called that my own little world. I explored every bit of it, and later people started buying land and putting up no trespassing signs, and that shut me out of what I called my own little world. And
Can you say anything about what it was like raising your family? Did your kids mostly grow up in Animas?
well, it was rougher on Grace, having to do all the diapers and stuff like that. Me, I worked, but I think it was tougher on her. But anyway, we went to California for a little while. I was going to get rich, and it didn't pan out, so we came back. I worked several jobs. I'm one of those done that, and after a while it gets boring. But we worked at a sawmill above Rustler's, and I did some well drilling and well repairs for irrigation pumps. And I did some of that in California at San Juan Capistrano. That's where the swallows go every March. Certain day, certain time, they're there, and we drilled just outside of there, and that was a good experience. And did a lot of farming, worked for farmers, and did some farming on my own. And we always managed to keep our kids fed. We didn't have to depend on anybody else, and so I think they had a good life. I have never heard them regret it. Otherwise, they talk real good about the way they grew up.
When you look back, um, what do you think, if you had to say something to the younger generation about what's important in life?
Well, my wife and I have been married 60 years, and we see kids getting married. It'll last half a year, maybe 2 years, and then it's gone. And I would encourage them to understand what love really is, and love has to go both ways. It can't go just one way. And I always think back of that song, A Horse and Carriage. I don't know if you've heard. Horse and Carriage is love and marriage. You know, a horse without a carriage or a carriage without a horse, they can't function. And so you've got to have the two to make it work. But that's, get involved in government in the right way. Don't, just because you're angry at one party or the other, don't tear one up, try to help. And I don't know, I regret that, well, there wasn't much I could do about straightening anything out, but I regret that we might leave this world in worse condition that we found it in. And I would like a better place for my grandkids and great-grandkids. And we do have great-grandkids. And I don't know how many because I didn't count last night, but we've got a lot of beautiful kids, and show compassion for the other people. We were talking this morning with our home nurse, and we were talking about people, you know, and there are some people that are here on earth that teach you how not to be, you know, and then there's those that you want to be like them, and you have to set an example yourself for other people. And I saw some prejudice, but you know, I always felt that's their problem, not mine, because I don't have any of that. And as old as I am, and being around, I see that both ways, and I don't like to see that.
What was the best thing about your life growing up?
I guess mine would be meeting my wife. That would be it. Very, very fortunate. And it was to happen. She came from Santa Monica, California, to rodeo.
I know you're
You know, and it was meant to be, and that's probably the happiest time of my life, and I never regretted it. That one's called Blue Spanish Eyes. Things have changed, and you know, this guitar has traveled with me for about 30 years. This hat, probably about the same length of time. But this guitar gets heavier and heavier every time that I pick it up, and it gets harder and harder to play. And
There's something written on your guitar.
it's something that I put on there, and
It says, "The gift of happiness belongs to those who unwrap it."
that's it.
Yeah.
And I never have learned this one. I sing it often, and I can't remember all the words. Maybe Grace will sing it with me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that done. Okay, Grace, that's your song.
I see how that.
And grace my fears relieve. Da 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 da. The moment I believe. I sing that at church all the time. I can't remember the words. I still need the cheat sheet. Just sitting here thinking of old times gone by, when I was a young boy. Oh, how time does fly. We lived by the railroad in this little old town, where cowmen and crackmen were always around. I remember the rumble of wheels on the rail, and the sounds of the engines, I still hear them well. Remembering the sounds of cattle and cowboys, getting closer and closer, what a beautiful sound. The whooping and hollering, the whistles and yelps, and the whinny of horses, they're all mixed in well. The train cars are ready for loading the beef. They're going by rail somewhere back east. But all this, it's gone now. The railroad is no more. The cow pens, they're all gone too, forevermore. But the memories remain, they're all in my mind, of the good men and women, better folks you can't find. Whether trackmen or cowmen, they made this old town. These are the memories of my old hometown. And then I whistle it and other stuff. But that'll do for now.
You're not gonna whistle it this time today?
I don't know if I can even whistle. I'm getting pretty dry. the memories remain. They're all in my mind of the good men and women, better folks you can't find. Whether trackmen or cowmen, they made this old town. These are the memories of my old hometown. That's it.